Good day to you, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Film Focus, episode 181, the double review for Inside Out 2 and Longlegs. Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen of the North, South, East, and West, and welcome to another episode of Film Focus. I'm your host, the Hyperson 55, and I'm glad that you decided to join me once again for some film-related discussion. And we're returning with another double review in the form of Inside Out 2 and Longlegs. I know, these are two very different films on different ends of the spectrum in terms of one being extremely light, fun, and happy for kids and families, and then you've got this horror thriller on the other side of the spectrum that's just super dark, creepy, and atmospheric, and you're just like, oh. But yeah, sometimes it's just kind of fun to go into the cinema and watch something that's so light and fluffy and then go to the dark side of the spectrum afterwards. It's just that nice sort of balance. I guess the closest equivalent I've had to that was last year when I went to see Oppenheimer and Barbie. I think I went with Barbie first and then Oppenheimer afterwards, and the the difference of like my leaving of the cinema after each one was pretty different. But yeah, I think just because of the timing of work and the availability of the screenings, things just lined up in a way where I ended up seeing just a super fun family film and then this dark horror thriller afterwards. It definitely gave me a lot to think about after I saw them yesterday at the time of recording. But yeah, man, I just wanted to put both of these in the same episode because I feel like I won't have as much to say in a singular episode for each. But yeah, I liked both for different reasons. I would say I probably preferred Inside Out 2 of the two of them. But that being said, I do think both films have their strengths and weaknesses, and I will attempt to tell you why in their reviews. There will be time codes below for whichever review you want to check out at which point. But yeah, I'll start in the order that I watched them in, Inside Out 2 first, and then we'll go to Longlegs afterwards. Alright, so when it comes to Inside Out 2, when it was first announced, I wasn't too on board with the idea. Now don't get me wrong, if you have an idea where you feel more can be done with that world, with the characters, and you have an interesting story to tell, by all means do it. But sometimes it can come across as feeling a bit lazy or desperate going back to a film that worked pretty well on its own, and because your current string of new films aren't working, you're just going back to something that's an established IP that you could put back out into the world and have a guaranteed interest from the audience and a guaranteed box office. Sometimes you can't help but feel cynical about that when it comes to certain business making decisions when these films get announced. But I was thinking, okay, if there is a film that could do something interesting with its world and storytelling, it could be Inside Out, because the original film from 2015 was held up as this pinnacle of Pixar in this little period where they'd run into a few bumps in terms of the quality of their films. And while I'm not in love with Inside Out, I do love a lot of the ideas that came with it. Inside Out was probably one of their most creative and visually interesting films that they had done for a while. And it came at a right time because Pixar, between 95 to the year 2010, had put out banger after banger, with a few exceptions to the rule here and there. But for the most part, they continue to advance the world of 3D animation and redefine what you could do in that medium when it came to storytelling and when it came to what you could do with characters, getting the emotions out of people, and creating all these various different worlds with a variety of different characters who have gone on to become part of not only people of my generation, but now their children and stuff like that. So Pixar was just on this string of bangers, but then after 2010, they just sort of started getting a little questionable with their material. So you had the likes of Cars 2, Brave, which I argue was half a good movie, Monsters University, which was decent but obviously didn't hold a candle to the original Monsters Inc. for a lot of people. So there was this feeling that, oh, maybe Pixar are losing their quality a little bit. But then Inside Out came out and you're just like, hey, we're back in the quality zone. But now we're in the 2020s, and since then we've had some decent stuff here and there, especially with my film Coco from 2017, absolute banger. I also quite liked Soul, and I also liked Turning Red from 2022, but Lightyear was a missed opportunity, but at the same time, I still question why that film exists in the first place. And Elemental, I never saw just because, even though it had some interesting visual ideas, I could see the story beats and how the film would play out from the trailer, and I was just like, yeah, I don't know if I really want to see that. But anyway, Inside Out 2, when the first trailer came out for that, I was like, okay, this seems pretty interesting. Riley growing up and turning into a teenager and dealing with puberty and all the extra emotions that come with that. And I was seeing the creativity in those trailers, so I was like, okay, okay. But then the film came out a little while ago at the time of this recording, and I just never got around to watching it because I was just like, as interesting as this film is, I don't know if I feel the immediate need to check it out. But after a fair few people had seen it and I'd seen how well it was doing in the box office, I'm like, well, there must be a reason why so many people are going to check this out now. So I ended up seeing it, and I'm not going to lie, I was surprised by how much I liked Inside Out 2. It was much better than I expected it to be, and maybe it's my fault for being so dismissive of the sequel prior to its release, and also because I haven't been too impressed with Pixar's output in recent years, save for like a couple films as I previously mentioned. But this feels like a solid continuation of what they established in the original, and it's films like this from Pixar that remind me essentially why I like this medium and why I like Pixar as a company, with all their magicians back there making all these really smart and creative choices that continue to impress and entice me in ways again that I didn't expect. So yeah, man, as per usual with these reviews, I'll talk about the story, characters and presentation, and then the overall conclusion. So without further ado, let's jump in. Okay, so the plot for this film can be summed up as the following. Taking place a few years after the original, we now return to our main character Riley, who's a few years older. She's entering her teenage years, and her primary emotions in her head, joy, sadness, fear, disgust and anger, are steering the ship as best as they can to ensure that Riley has a wonderful life experience, pursuing her further interest in hockey alongside her best friends. However, one day puberty starts, and this introduces a bunch of new emotions in the form of anxiety, envy, embarrassment, and ennui. And these new emotions clash with the originals as they create this new dynamic that threatens to affect Riley's current point in her life and her friendship. And so this film now becomes this sort of struggle for control of Riley's mind, trying to make sure that she makes the best decisions possible. And that's a way for me to summarize this film without going into the area of spoilers. So, much like the original film, this is about the emotions within Riley's head, basically just trying to steer her in the right direction, but also trying to deal with scenarios that they haven't come across before. Because with the original emotions from the first film, they had to basically figure out what was good for Riley, but also figure out what was good for themselves. It was a case of trying to find the balance between all of these different emotions, and having Joy, who was technically the leader, also find a way to deal with sadness and making sure that, again, they work together to have Riley's best interests play out in the best way possible. But with these new emotions in the form of anxiety being this new primary emotion that is well organized, but also makes a lot of interesting and questionable decisions that obviously makes Joy feel a little uncomfortable. It's interesting to see this new power dynamic and how some of the emotions like engage with each other, how some are, receptive to each other and other ones are not so much. And again, the way that Pixar, when they're creatively in their flow, create these sort of internal animated scenarios that play out in Riley's life in a way that feels so authentic to the teenage experience. It's insane. The way in which, again, the emotions end up doing certain things and it translates to Riley's life in real time. You're just like, oh my gosh. I never thought of it that way, but again, these guys are so good in the writing department to go about and create these situations of awkwardness, of embarrassment, of super happy times, but sometimes aggressiveness, and how you can change your emotions on the fly and how you think about things, either long term or in like a moment. It's just great. And the way this film made me feel anxious for Riley in real time it was mad. I also appreciate some of the themes that this film was going through in terms of growing up, trying to hang on to the things that you love, but also experiencing new things as well, and then trying to find that balance between moving on and exploring new options, but also not forgetting what came before. And then also you have the idea of change and how it is technically inevitable. And how do you handle that? Is it something that you embrace? Is it something that you can cooperate with? Or is it something that you reject and then you try to force things to stay the same and then you see what kind of results happen after that? It's very interesting and pretty good stuff. And while there is definitely a fair few echoes to how the first film happened, I do feel like, as I mentioned before, it's a great way for this film to just build on the foundation of what came before and just reinforce and strengthen some of these characters that we've seen in the previous films, especially when it comes to the emotions. I was quite impressed with what they did with joy, sadness, and anger. But also the new emotions, especially anxiety, did a great job of changing the power dynamic and doing their best to enhance Riley's life experience, but also having some potential chaotic and dangerous elements put into play as well. And yeah, the film was quite fun. It had its moments of humor that I quite liked. Some of it was unexpected, but again, it just does a great job of visualizing the internal experiences that people deal with when they start to grow up and become a teenager. And while my life wasn't nearly as complicated as Riley's, I can look back on some of the scenarios that I went through in my life and relate them to Riley's in certain parts of the film. And I was like, yo, I know exactly what that feels like in Pixar. You magicians, you done it again. Alright, now it's time to talk about the characters, and I think that they were all pretty good. Everybody contributed to this film in a way that felt like it mattered and added substance to the overall story. And yeah, when it comes to the voice cast, everybody did a good job. There's too many people to mention, so I'll only go for a handful in this section, but I do feel like all the characters played a pretty good role, whether it was the emotions or the real life characters. So yeah, I still love Joy, who's played by Amy Poehler, who I love in mostly everything. She brings this crazy big energy to her voice work and really helps bring the character to life. And I like how Joy, even though she's learnt lessons from the previous film, she still can be a little overbearing and not as cooperative or as open to change as you would like her to be during certain scenarios. But yeah, this is another film where she has to learn some lessons and grow as an emotion, and she has some really good moments in here which I quite liked, which again just allowed her to become a more three-dimensional character, more so than the last one. And again, Poehler is just so good. And I also liked Lewis Black as Anger. I quite liked him in the previous film, but he had a few moments in this film which made me like him a lot more than I expected. And when it comes to the new emotions, Maya Hawke as Anxiety was incredible. She was easily like my favorite other emotion outside of joy. And while anxiety did cause me a great deal of anxiety during the film as well, and did frustrate me on occasions, it was obviously part of the story, so I'm not hating on the character too much for that. It was part of the story and she served her purpose well. But Maya Hawke added so much dimensions to the character through her voice work. Ayo Adebiri as Envy was also quite good. I liked that character. She just had like a lot of funny lines, and her interaction with the other emotions was pretty good. Tony Hale as Fear, I quite liked as well. Again, he had some fun moments, much like a few of the other emotions, where it was just some standout parts here and there. Where I'm like, yep, I like you, I like you. And yeah, man, I think just all the rest of the other characters do a really good job of presenting these new and interesting scenarios for Riley to deal with, and they all contributed their jobs just pretty darn well. Alright, and now it's time for the presentation. If there's one thing that Pixar are always good at is a presentation, and that is definitely the case here. I will admit, Pixar have reached a certain peak in the last, I'd say, 5 or so years where their work is as clean as it could be. So most times if you're going for that sort of photorealistic realism that they tend to employ when it comes to the lighting, the detail in character faces, their paws, hair and super dramatic lighting and making environments look as realistic as possible, they've definitely reached that peak now, at least in my opinion. So now it's just down to the art direction to create a unique look. And obviously they're building on the foundation of a already established film. So while I haven't watched the original Inside Out for a while, I can definitely see the enhancement in detail when it comes to the hair, the way the lighting is done, and trying to stylize the animation a little bit more to be a little bit more bouncy and stretchy. But also when it comes to the stuff going on internally in Riley's head, they've done a really good job of enhancing the detail on all of the emotions and seeing their weird little skin texture and the way that they glow or change color and get affected by light. All those little technical details is really cool. But then going through Riley's head and seeing all these other different locations, some of which we saw before and some of which we're seeing for the first time, the amount of detail and creativity and just color, the colors are everywhere. They're so vivid and so many imaginative stuff going on, but there's also some uses of different mediums that I didn't expect to see. While this film is primarily 3D animated, there were some 2D animated sections that blended pretty well with the current 3D style. And again, just the messing around with art direction and seeing certain different types of mediums in the same space, it was just great. Again, visuals were wonderful, really nicely designed and really well animated. And the film score I was quite impressed with. I believe it was Michael Giacchino who did the score for the original Inside Out, but this new score is from someone called Andrea Datzman. I recognize some of the themes from the original, but the way in which they've taken some of those and built upon it and created this new sound, I found it surprisingly effective, very enchanting, very good, very nerve-wracking. Again, as with any good film score, you create a sound that matches the scenarios that they are needed for. And Datzman's score is quite good. I would say I'd probably even want to check it out outside of the film. But hats off to her, and I hope to see, or should I say hear, her work on other films going ahead. So in conclusion, Inside Out 2 was pretty darn good. And as I mentioned before, better than I expected. It feels like a good companion to the original, and you can look at them as a two-parter. While I can see them wanting to do another film, I feel like this is as far as you really need to take Riley's story. If they were going to go a little further with this, then I would want them to go a little further down the line and age Riley up a little bit. But this would require them to go a little deeper into the psyche of individuals in their late teens to early 20s, because that's when the true stresses of life really start to kick in. And I feel like some of that could be a little too complicated or dark for Pixar when they are really more of a family-friendly kind of thing. So yeah, for me, I would like this to be the end point, because I feel like they've done as much relevant stuff as they can with Riley's character and making use of this emotional landscape and, just creating this really fun, imaginative and well-crafted story with, good voice performances from everybody involved, great art direction and animation, a really lovely film score, and a story that, again, mirrors the complexities and highs and lows of the start of teenage life. If you haven't seen it already, give it a watch in the cinema. If you don't want to watch it in the cinema, obviously wait for Disney Plus. But I would say this is one of Pixar's better films. All right, and now we move on to Longlegs. Now, this is a film that I think I mentioned before, but in case I didn't, I was aware of its existence within the last month, and it's slowly been creeping up on my interest chart after a few friends I know have seen it and rated it pretty highly, and my uncle told me that was pretty good as well. So I was like, okay, let me see what's going on with this. And coming out of that film yesterday, I will say that Longlegs is an interesting beast of a film. It starts out with an eerie and atmospheric vibe and takes you on a journey that is fairly intriguing. But then there's a reveal slash switch up that changes how you view the previous events, and that caught me off guard. Now, I don't want to say that this film is reliant on the twist. I would say, I'm not sure if you'd call it a twist. Again, it's more of a reveal than anything else. But it's one of those where the film is still good prior to that point. It's just that once that reveal occurs, you're just like, oh damn, okay. And that was one of the little things that a friend of mine let me know before I saw the film yesterday. And yeah, it was just like, damn, okay, that's pretty interesting. All right, so when it comes to the plot, it can be summed up as the following. This film follows an FBI agent by the name of Lee who is tasked with tracking down a serial killer who deals in the occult. They were able to go about and kill a number of families over a course of time without physically being there. So it's the FBI's job to track them down and figure out this mystery. And that's a way for me to summarize the film without going into the area of spoilers. One thing that I think that this film does well above anything else is its atmosphere. There is this constant, uncomfortable, unnerving vibe throughout. Like, you can tell something is amiss from the time the film starts, and from there to the end it always just feels like something is amiss or something is about to happen. And because of this constant feeling like you're on edge on a lot of occasions, you're just waiting for something to happen but you don't know when. And the film does a really good job of slowly but methodically laying out all of its plot points, its character story, and its interesting themes and whatnot. And then once certain plot points come to light, it makes you reassess what's come before. And it reminds me of a notable horror film that came out in 2017. I can't say the name because when I do, it kind of gives away something very specific about the tone of this film. But if you know about a certain type of horror film that was pretty notable, which I think was either in 2017 or 2018. Crap, I might have got the date wrong, sorry. But anyway, within those 2 years, there is one. Anyway, if you know who I am, message me and let me know if you know the film that I'm talking about. But yeah, this film could have easily implemented a lot more of these standard scares or jump scares that you find in a lot more mainstream horror films. But they were smart. They let the film breathe. And I would say that I wouldn't call the pacing slow. I would definitely say that it does take its time in terms of laying out all of its bricks, giving you all of these interesting elements that are part of this sort of Lego house foundation. And as it starts to build things up, by the time you get to the finished masterpiece at the end, you'll be like, oh, okay, so I can see what you were doing with these bricks here, and this is how you built this area here to create the final picture. I will say, though, that for this film, which was touting being like one of the scariest films in, like, you know, is it recent times or in the past decade or whatever, I didn't find myself scared. I found myself more creeped out. And this film is definitely creepy. It has a lot of strange, weird, uncomfortable moments here and there with its imagery and its use of sound. And yeah, just speaking of the sound, even though I'd normally do this in the presentation area, I might just come back to it later on. But the sound, man, the way that they utilized music and sound effects, whether you're talking about the score or the way that people talking, it just felt louder than usual to the point where it's just like, I felt something was going to happen. It threw me off on occasion because I'm just like, yo, you guys are a little too loud. Or they do that thing where they will use music at certain points, but then they don't. So when it's just like people talking or it's just atmospheric noise, you're just like, yo, something's going to happen. Yo, stop that. I don't like that. I think that's one of the most effective things about horror is where they are smartly making use of sound or not using sounds. But yeah, I would say Longlegs has a lot of creepy moments. A lot of moments where you're just like, again, on edge, just trying to figure out what the shag is going on. And am I safe? Forget about the characters on screen. Am I safe from the scares that you're trying to project towards me? It was that kind of thing. But yeah, again, much like when The Conjuring came out and people were saying that film was super scary, again, not scary. competently well made, creepy, well acted, but not scary. But that's just me personally. I still don't think there'll ever be a film that scared me or creeped me out more than when I watched The Descent and Wreck for the first times. Those films scarred me. I can watch them now, no problem, because obviously I know what happens, but good lord. The first 2 times of watching those, now that was scary crap. Actually, one other thing I will mention, I think that the ending of this film wasn't as strong as it could have been. Now, I wouldn't say it was terrible, but with the way that the film built up, by the time you get to the ending, you're just like, oh, okay. Not the way I would have ended it. Not that I really have the writing talent to write a better version of it, but it's just like, again, sometimes you get to the end of the film, you're just like, okay. Anyway, going to the cast, I thought the cast were pretty cool. It's a very small cast, so it allows all the people involved to really flex their acting muscles and do pretty good jobs with the characters that they play. Micah Monroe as Lee Harker, she's the main FBI agent who is at the center of the film, and she did a really good job. Her character, she has a particular knack for being able to ascertain information that other agents can't, and she's able to go into this case and get a little further than most people who have been working on it in the past. And I thought Monroe just played the role so well. She had this very quiet, intense performance. And yeah, Monroe was really good. I thought she had this really good back and forth with Blair Underwood, who played Agent Carter. And I find it interesting that his name is Agent Carter, because obviously, for those of you who know about Underwood's filmography, he was part of the Marvel Universe when he joined Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I believe in Season 3, where he played the husband of Melinda May. So, yeah, just some minor Marvel connection. But yeah, that was my introduction to him as an actor. And I haven't seen him in anything for a while, so when I knew he was going to be in this film, I was excited. And Underwood is still good. He has this really cool, commanding presence where he can be assertive yet cool at the same time at numerous points. But he also provides just a tiny bit of humor at certain moments as well. Not in a way that ruins the groove or comes at an inappropriate time. He just has a naturally charming demeanor. And again, him and Monroe played off of each other pretty well, and I like their relationship in the movie. And then, of course, we can't talk about this film without mentioning Nicolas Cage, who plays like the serial killer Longlegs, and good gravy. Nicolas Cage is something else. Now, sometimes when he plays characters that are a little bit more out there, a little bit more eccentric, sometimes he can go a little overboard, and I felt like he rode that line pretty well. The makeup and the design of his character definitely helped hide some of those crazier facial features that he tends to do in some of these films on occasions. But yeah, I thought he was pretty good. Again, very effective in the role. Sometimes he did feel a little too over the top, but these were very rare occasions. I would say like maybe 20% at max. But yeah, no, he did a good job with this, and it was nice to see crazy yet restrained at the same time. That's the way I would describe his performance. And Alicia Witt, she played a pretty cool part in this. She plays Lee's mother in the film, and they have a very interesting dynamic in this film. And yeah, Witt was pretty darn good playing her character. So yeah, just that's the main people that I would want to mention in the cast. And so now we move on to the presentation. And I would say this is definitely one of the stronger elements of this film. There's some interesting things done with the visual presentation, especially when it comes to aspect ratios. I think there's a little bit use of old-timey filter projections on there. And the film definitely has its moments of, like, you know, is it surprise and some moments of violence and some unsettling visual imagery. And there's some really effective editing, but also really good use of tight shots to cool establishing shots. Some big wide open shots where things are shot in a way where you're just looking for like little details off to the corner, because it's framed in a way where it's just like sometimes characters are in the center of the camera or just to the side, but in a way where it's just like you're focusing on the stuff in the foreground, but you kind of feel like there might be stuff happening in the background. And the music by Zilgi. At least I hope that is how I say their name. It's either Zilgi or Zilgi. It's spelled Zilgi. It was pretty good, unsettling, loud, but not in that way that's overwhelming. It's more just like, again, very effective in illustrating these moments of fear, tension, or surprise, or just chaos. And I thought they did a good job with that. So yeah, in the end, I would say overall, Longlegs was a pretty good film. It's competently made, it's well crafted, has some really great performances, and definitely leaves an impression on you once it's over. And while it didn't resonate with me on a level like a lot of other people have been going on about, because, you know, there's a lot of people saying that this film is like the next gold standard in the form of like horror, like, you know, films. And I can see to a degree where some people would get that impression, but for me, it just doesn't reach those like super high heights. But yeah, I'd be very curious to hear what you think about the film. So yeah, please be sure to drop it in the comment section below. Okay, and that is my reviews for both films done. Now I turn it over to you, ladies and gentlemen. What did you think of Inside Out 2 and Longlegs? Did you like one or the other, or did you like both? Whatever your thoughts are, again, drop them in the comment section below, or hit me up on Twitter where I'm at Hypersonic55 or at FilmFocus55. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, which I just mentioned. What am I talking about? And obviously, you can find the podcast on most places where podcasts. Why am I failing at words? Anyway, you can find me on places where podcasts can be found. So primarily on Spotify, SoundCloud, iTunes, and all those other sort of places. But yeah, that'll be me done rambling for the time being. Thank you for listening as always. And until the next time, this is the Hypersonic 55 signing out. Peace.